Welcome to the Private Lenders Podcast with your hosts from Hard Money Bankers, Jason Balin and Chris Haddon. This podcast is sponsored by hardmoneymastermind.com.
Hey everyone, Chris and Jason here. Thank you for checking out the show. Real quick before we get started, we are having our first annual summer event here in Maryland, June 4th and 5th. We have one spot left. If you're interested, go check out hardmoneymastermind.com, click on live events, and you can talk to Dave Bauer, our head of membership, to learn more. Okay, today we're talking about origination and scripting. Over all these years, several thousand loans, training our team, also training everyone in the mastermind group, we've really gotten the scripting of origination down to a science. And when we're talking about purchase and rehab loans, which is probably the bread and butter for a lot of private lenders, us included, it's the majority of what we do, we are going to break it down for you today. The 7 questions that you can ask quickly, efficiently, while building rapport and conversation to know for sure whether or not you can do their deal.
This is a fun topic because it's what I do every day. It's what I've trained a lot of other private lenders on our team to do. And, people always ask, it's like, well, how do you talk to so many borrowers? The process takes a long time. And typically what I'll tell people is if it's a loan that you can't do, the phone call really doesn't need to take more than 2 minutes. And if it's a deal that you can do, probably takes 5 minutes. Like you can bang out, calls to determine if it's a viable deal or not by verbally asking the right questions in a conversation, right? Like what you don't want to do is have a checklist of like, okay, let me go through my checklist real quick and make sure I got everything covered. What is this question? What is this question? Like the purpose of this is these 7 things you can accomplish by having a conversation with somebody. And some of the times you don't even have to actually ask the question and you can still get it out of them. So let's start like this. Get on the phone with someone. Hey, this is Jason at Hard Money Bankers. Typically the first question that they ask is, hey, what are your rates? Because that's just what somebody would think to ask. They don't really care what the rate is. Maybe they care, maybe they don't, but that's just what they're going to ask. So typically the easy rebut is no problem. Happy to help you with that. We have a few products. Let me just go real quick through your deal, see if it's something we can help with. Yeah, sure. So a few kind of things right off the bat. Is this a purchase or, is it a purchase or a refinance? What's the address of the property, purchase price, construction costs, and what do they think the value of the property is, right? The ARV, maybe as is value. So that's a few questions right there. And you can kind of just bang out some of those right at the beginning and have them talk to see kind of where the conversation goes, right? Because here's the thing. If and there's a few more qualifying questions I'm going to get to in a second, but if you can get all these questions answered, for the most part if you can do the deal or not, right? We always base things off of the borrower's numbers first, not our numbers first. So yes, we're going to pull comps. Yes, we're going to determine what the value is. Yes, we're going to verify they have experience and they know what they're doing. But we're going to base everything off theirs first. If they don't have any money, you can't do a deal for them. Unless maybe they have a cash partner, cross collateral, things like that. But if they don't really have anything to put towards this, or if they need 100% financing, we can't do anything with them. So it doesn't have to advance, doesn't have to go any further. So typically when they're asking, okay, well, what's the address? Oh, it's so-and-so, 123 Main Street. Usually we'll try to create rapport based on that address. And what I mean by that is, oh yeah, I'm familiar with that. We've done some other loans in that area. Grew up in that city. I know a restaurant in that area, right? Like while I'm on the phone, I'd like to be on my computer at the same time, so I can go on, Google Street View and familiarize myself with it and say something to them that's relatable back to that. Okay, so anyways, they tell you what the purchase price is. They tell you what the estimate construction cost is. They tell you what the after repair value is approximately. Where they're, and those are somewhat, even it might not seem like that. Like those are qualifying questions to ask them. The reason why is, are they buying it at a good price? Are their construction costs reasonable? And is their after repair value reasonable? Right. So you can determine if the borrower knows what they're doing or not just based on that. Right. If somebody's buying a property for $200,000 that other investors are paying $150 for, or that's on the market for, lower than that and they're paying more, it's like, okay, something's not matching up. Is their construction cost reasonable? If the property's built in 1920 and it needs a lot of renovations and they say that the work's only going to cost them 40 grand, that's not reasonable, right? If the comps in the area are 300 and they're like, oh, well, mine's going to be the best around, I'm going to get 340 for it, might not be reasonable, right? So those are all things that are taken in consideration, and you got to think deeper besides just the answer of those questions when you're talking to them, so you can determine, you like, listen, everything's off the 4 C's, the 4 underwriting C's, right? So collateral is the most important, then character tells you a lot about your character, if they're reasonable or not, and their capacity, and then their credit. So anyways, so those are the first few questions to ask just to see where their head is. I typically like to ask something related to like, hey, have you ever done deals like this in the past? Right? I didn't ask them like what their experience is. I said, have you done deals like this in the past? Oh yeah, I own a rental property here and there. I own like 2 rental properties. And I did one fix and flip. I sold it, a few years back. Oh, how'd you do on that fix and flip? It wasn't bad. I went over budget. Cool. On your rental properties, those free and clear, or do you have debt service on those? It's like, oh, I actually have a DSCR loan that I just did on one, and I have, Wells Fargo on the other. Okay, if they got DSCR loan and they have Wells Fargo loan, they probably have good credit, right? You can still ask that question about credit, but you can determine these things by just asking them, simple questions, and then you can get all that stuff taken care of. I'm gonna tell you a really good story here in a second that I have, but you can get all these questions answered without actually like going through a checklist and asking them, just by being conversational, right? So, well, I did a deal back there. Okay, chances are they're not a full-time fix and flipper. That's okay. They probably have a W-2 job and they do some real estate investing on the side. Nothing wrong with that. And then usually when we come to the question about how much cash do they have or how much money they're willing to put into the deal, I like to ask the question 2 different ways, maybe even 3 different ways. So it's like, okay, you're buying the property for 200 grand, it needs 50 grand in work. How much, were you looking, to finance on this particular deal? Sometimes they'll just say, oh, as much as possible. Sometimes they'll be like, well, I've got like 100 grand I can put into this thing, so maybe just the rest. You're like, okay, great. Like, you probably don't even need $100,000, but they're saying they could put up $100,000. So why do a higher loan amount if you don't need to, right? So that's one little common thing, is ask them, like, approximately how much were you looking in for there? Oh, I'm looking for as much as possible. Sure, no problem. Typically what we do is up to 80% of the purchase, 100% of construction, give or take. So then I'll be like, well, how much can you work with on this project? You might need, I don't know, call it 60 grand. Sometimes be like, yeah, no problem, that's fine. Some be like, oh, I was looking closer to 20 grand. But like, yeah, that might be a little bit light. How much total, liquidity do you have in general? I'm not saying you need to use the whole amount. I'm just curious, right? Qualifying questions. And some people might say, I have 200 grand, but I only want to put in 50 grand on this deal. No problem. But you gotta get that out, right? Like, you gotta figure out these compensating factors on some of these deals by kind of asking some questions and having them talk. So the purpose of it is, if you can get some of these questions answered, pretty close if it's a deal you're comfortable doing or a deal you're going to be able to do or not, right? And again, I haven't even comped properties yet. I haven't gotten to look at the property yet. There's a lot of things I haven't done yet, but I know based on having the conversation with them, if it's something that, I think we can do or I think we can't do, right? If they don't have cross collateral, they don't have much cash, it's not a deal that we're going to do. If they have, 20, 30, 40% they can put into the deal, they seem like they know what they're doing, they seem like they have halfway decent credit, great, we have something there. Let's keep the conversation going. If they don't, there's no point. You can get them off the phone, quickly. So we can go through these calls very, 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 very quickly and efficiently to determine, which borrowers potentially have something to work with and which ones don't. And a big mistake that a lot of private lenders make is they try to do every deal that crosses their plate. They try to get creative. I don't call it creative. I think it's kind of just desperate in order to just make any deal they can work, even if it just can't. Keep in mind, just because a borrower wants to use you and accepts your terms doesn't necessarily mean that you want them as a borrower. It doesn't mean they qualify to work with you.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely common amongst lenders who don't have enough lead flow. They're trying to make deals work, even if they probably don't. Also want to throw in a few pro tips that we have built into our scripting process over the years. Number one, take control of the conversation as soon as you can, because a lot of real estate investors are going to want to get on the phone and start telling you all kinds of stories about how they found the property and about the, all the renovations they plan on doing to it and this and that. And it's going to end up burning a lot of time. And so in a polite way, we'll say something like, okay, no, I understand. All right, I'll tell you what, let me ask you a few questions and we'll see if we can do this deal for you or not. And then you just go into your scripting, like following the stuff that we were talking about: address, purchase price, construction costs, ARV, credit experience, all the stuff that we were talking about. And once you get that going, they'll follow along and they'll back off like the storytelling, which is what we're trying to avoid, because we're trying to, save time.
Because you're right. Because what's important to you might not be important to them, or what's important to them might not be important to you. Right? Like,
Right.
They can tell me about this humongous land development deal that they did. Like, one of the things I always ask real quick is, where's the property located? Because we don't lend in every state. We don't lend in every city. We don't lend in every zip code. We don't lend in areas, some areas 10 minutes away from our office. So we're very particular about that. So you got to get like the important stuff done quickly. And listen, I've done 100,000 of these calls over the years, and I probably had like 2 or 3 people ever that have gotten mad at me because we've turned them down, told them we didn't lend in an area, told them that they needed a big down payment. Like, you do it the right way. And you're the private lender. So a real good tip with that is, hey, listen, I get it. This seems like a great project. We do lend our own money, and I hate to say, but we're kind of picky on some of these things. So it's just not a great deal for us personally. I think it could be a good deal for you, and I'm hoping you can get capital for it. Unfortunately, it's not a great one for us. And then people will always respect that. So like, that's your scapegoat, worst case scenario if you need to, as an out, if you're scared to turn somebody down.
Yeah. So speaking of property location, that's another pro tip that is in our process, is that whenever we find out where the property is, you get the address or at least a town or something like that, immediately find a way to relate yourself to the property. It builds a lot of credibility and rapport. That they say, oh, you're buying in Catonsville. Cool. Oh, yeah, our HMB's first office was in Catonsville. And they're like, oh, yeah, and I know the area well. Or, okay, no, you're buying a property in 10th Street Southeast near Capitol Hill in DC. Yeah, no. We financed another property there last summer. I know that block really well, right by Eastern Market. Stuff like that, right? Or Silver Spring. Oh, yeah, we grew up not far. So whatever, it's all true, the stuff. Like, we're not making up BS here. We just know our area where we lend and where we live very well. So whatever the area might be, we can find an easy way to relate ourselves to that property. And it builds a lot of credibility in the borrower's mind. Yeah.
And because you're localized, you're not a national institutional backed lender. You're local. And guess what? If you're newer to a market, go on Google and search it. There was one that I wasn't familiar with the other day, and I was on Google Maps because I'm Google Maps a lot. And I was like, oh, it's the house with the greenhouse. It's the greenhouse, right? And they're like, no, it's actually the one next to it, the White House. I'm like, oh, okay, I see it, and it's got this, and it's got this. It's on the corner of this street and this street. Like, I didn't tell them that I was an expert in that area. I just related to it. Yep, you get it. You know exactly which one it is. Okay, real quick story, and then and then we'll end this episode. So, and I'll never forget this. So, and I like to share this story because I think will be relatable to a lot of people. So about a year ago, I talked to a real estate investor called us, who I knew his name, but I never met him before. And, he was pretty sophisticated in general. So we're having just a conversation about who we know, how, some of the people that we know, some of his real estate portfolio holdings, some of the areas that he buys in. And then he's like, what are the next steps? And I was like, we're ready. Like, we're ready. Like, get that property we're just talking about under contract and we'll close. He goes, well, don't I have to make an application, pull credit, do all these other things? And I was like, no, we're good. The reason why, and he's like, well, you don't know anything about me. I was like, we just had a 5-minute conversation. I know you have a rental portfolio that's got debt on it from some major banks. So I know you have good credit. And he's like, true. I know you have experience because all the deals you were telling me about were very reasonable budgets and you know what you're doing. I know you're a real estate agent locally and you know some of the values on some of these houses. And he's like, true. And I was like, everything that we typically would want to see if you had, you know, good characteristics, good collateral, experience, cash. You told me you have cash and you're not looking for 100% financing and you have a decent amount of money you can put in all these deals. So like, you're good. And he's like, well, do I have to do a loan application? I was like, no. What's a loan application going to tell me that I don't already know? I said, and this is another quick tip as well, is we don't do formal loan applications. We have a Google Sheet, or if you have a loan origination software, you do that. And then really the only other information you need is to ask them for their social security number. Well, really what we do is on our term sheet, the last page, you know, we ask for their driver's license and then we ask for their social security number and a signature. And we have all the information we need, right? We have their social, their date of birth, their primary residence address. We have everything else we need. So we don't go through a process of having borrowers fill out formal loan applications. I don't like giving people work. I don't need to give them work. So in this case, he's like, oh, do I fill out a loan application and then call me back? I'm like, no, we're good. Bring me the property. I'll double check the numbers. You're qualified. You're good to go. So I thought that was an interesting story, just because it was kind of exaggerated, because most people don't say that. But he was like, what do you mean I'm approved? Like, what's your process? Like, he was like, what about the loan application? I have to do this. I have to do this. Then this takes time. It's like, you're good to go. You bring a property today that needs to close tomorrow and you have clean title work, we'll close it tomorrow. You get a property under contract, we're good. I was like, if you want to know exactly what the numbers are, send me it and I'll look at the numbers real quick. I'll pull comps, I'll determine the numbers. But other than that, like, you're good. So I thought that was interesting. And even if you're a newer lender, try to get to that point, right? Because, you know, there's no reason to ask for stuff you don't need. So I think if you can kind of get through a conversation and get these 7 questions answered, you can determine real quick if it's a deal you can do or not deal. And yeah, sometimes you might need some more stuff. You know, sometimes maybe you do want a tax return, or maybe there's, you know, cross collateral or credit partners or capital partners have to be in the mix as well. But in general, these should be able to determine if you can make the deal work or not.
Yeah, I mean, picture that level of confidence going into a call when you know your area, you make your own decisions, you control your capital, and you can put out a real quote and know that you're going to land. You're going to know that you're going to close that way, as opposed to a lot of the nationwide people, and you have a loan originator who doesn't know anything about the area and they have no idea how much the loan amount's going to end up being. Like, imagine the level of comfort on the borrower's end and one of those situations versus the other. So, all right, guys, we appreciate it. Thanks for checking out the show. If you haven't done so already, go visit hardmoneymastermind.com, new and improved. Take a look around, and we'll see you here next time on the Private Lenders Podcast.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Private Lenders Podcast. Please note that the opinions stated by all the speakers on this show are only opinions and not intended for legal, financial, or accounting advice. Please make sure to always check with your own legal, accounting, and financial professionals. If you enjoyed this episode of the Private Lenders Podcast, we'd appreciate it if you would spread the word. Make sure to check out hardmoneymastermind.com, the #1 free community for new and experienced private and hard money lenders.